So the second thing is that there is a required assignment, and I actually just put I just uploaded that because I did not want to scare y'all off. So the way that it's organized is, the way that it's written is scary, but and then there's a rubric for it. So what I did with the organization is basically take that assignment, and this is why, speaking to Patrick's point, is the syllabus is deconstructed, is I took that assignment and thinking about understanding by design, right, Wiggins and McTee, and worked backwards from that. So I pulled out all of the learning objectives that are required or embedded in that assignment, and you'll be doing in each module a piece of the required final in a way that is, like, I think a bit more student friendly in terms of language. So you'll be meeting the requirements that you have, it's not a big final at the end of the course. So you'll do a little bit along the way, and then you'll put it all together at the end. So you'll have opportunities to discuss, to read, to revise, and then you'll have like one final step to do at the end of the course. And yeah, that'll be it. So that's why our syllabus is kind of not one document, because it doesn't make sense to be like that. Does that make sense? Okay.
So just to clear a quick question, sorry to interrupt.
It's okay.
So is it hold on a second here, I'm pulling it up here. It's the Sustainable Staff Development Plan, right?
Right. So I'm actually going to share my screen and like sort of go through everything.
Okay.
So there,
right.
So yeah, so I'm gonna break it down. Hold on. So I'm gonna turn to the student view. I'm just gonna let y'all see my view, because I can navigate it a little bit easier. So let me just share my screen. So yours looks a little bit different, but it's the same thing. So can everybody see that? Okay, so obviously, this is your opening page. So I'm just clicking on content. So what we're doing sort of all right now is I'll talk a little bit about, I've already done this in some of the things I've just said. I'll talk a little bit about my approaches to thinking about teaching and andragogy, which is different from pedagogy, is teaching adults. And then we'll look at some of this course information. These professional resources, we're not going to go through those, but these are sort of all the things that I'm sure a lot of you have already seen before, but it's just a sort of in one place that you may need to refer to in the course, or you steal it for your teaching, what have you, or whatever your roles are in course. I know people have different roles. So a couple of things that you'll need in the course are the Pennsylvania school discipline laws, because we'll be looking at school policy. I had that survey question about Danielson clusters, so here they are. It's a little bit, I think, an easier way to look at it than the framework for evaluation. The ELCC standards, let's pull it up. So this is actually the professional organization for school leadership. Are any of y'all members? I can't see everybody right now. No members? Okay. So that may be something to think about, and maybe like for my professional memberships, and even when I was teaching, you might be able to get your institution to provide funding for it, because sometimes these memberships can be expensive. But anyhow, this document has all of that. I'll come back to it. Has all of the standards. These are standards for the course. So they're all here, and they're broken down in each module. But this document, just lost it. Oh, here it goes. Is the research basis behind all of the standards. So, you know, read this in your free time. How many pages is it? 78 pages. It's not that bad, but it explains the research that supports the standards. The last thing that's about it, that are like, I would definitely look at sooner than later. Okay. Questions so far? Okay. So this is week 1, and basically, this is just, you're just engaging in a sort of overview broadly of thinking about supervision and finance. So I put some articles here. So this article is on education reform. It's actually an excerpt. So it starts with a nation at risk. And that was a legislation that was passed in 1983 that has sort of undergirded much of how we think about teaching and the ways that teaching, that policy has been enacted to make a significant amount of pressure and responsibility about teaching on the shoulders of teachers, regardless of the supports that they have in their district, in their schools, the challenges that they may face. You know, emerging out of the Reagan era was still these notions about like a race to the top, even though that's our current, a part of our current legislation about our improvement in science and math and thinking about the space race. So like, to the extent that teachers need to make these things happen. So this is very quick. Did anybody get a chance to look at it? I mentioned it. Okay, some people looked at it, cool. So I think this is a good place to start so that you're familiar with how education reform has looked from the 1980s up until our present educational policy. So when I entered teaching was the beginning of No Child Left Behind. Like I got into teaching, I started teaching like the year before NCLB. So I was sort of in between A Nation at Risk and NCLB. So you can think about where you are in these reform efforts. There's a quick introduction to supervision, and these are the documents, these are our policy documents that for the state of Pennsylvania that undergird teacher supervision. So one of the survey questions I asked you all was like, what's your level of familiarity? Like, does your district employ these for evaluation? And many of y'all answered that it does, but to the extent that that takes place or the fidelity around that policy, again, you could have varying experiences with it. So my suggestion is not, again, these are like 200-page documents as well. Just scan them, like just so you can see like the framework and the domains. You'll need them to work on your staff development plan. But for now, it's just an overview. And then finally, there's 2 articles. One, they're very, like, you can just click on them if you haven't already. I'll click on it. Just like very brief pieces on school budgeting. So this is a policy document. So this is a resource that you can refer back to throughout the course. So my suggestion right now is to just take a look at them and scan them, skim them. So that's kind of where we are for week 1. So I want to just go back to the course introduction. And if you're using your computers, you can open this too. So the modules are mission, vision, and principles of leadership, understanding your school context, resources, and then is your sustainability plan, your school development plan. So that's the crux of the expectation, that you're able to create a school development plan. So again, rather than us doing a bunch of reading and stuff here, and then you have this like mega assignment at the end, each week you'll begin to work on a part of the big project. So this final week there's still some additional work to do, but you'll have created, so drawing from a constructivist model, like you'll have built upon all of those weeks to integrate all of what you learn into one project. So just for your own edification, take a look click on the program final assignment, I'm sorry. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that y'all can look at it. I mean, I would look at the goal. Yeah, I mean, it's worth reading. So I'm going to give you like a couple of minutes. I'm going to stop sharing my screen to look at it. Everybody can pull it up? Okay. So I'll give y'all a few minutes and then let's talk about it. And you can plop questions in the chat if they're coming up as you're reading. Yes. Okay. Yes. Good question. So yes, it's the same thing, Mark. If you look at actually the last component, that's a great question. Did everybody see? Mark's question was, this is the sustainable staff development. So I thought this sustainable staff development was a better title than program final, whatever. So the section that says development program, that's the same thing as sustainable staff development, that last component. Cool. Other questions? Are we good? I see some question faces. Ernesto, what are you thinking?
No, I was just kind of, as you were talking about this, now I'm kind of seeing it. Like, so I wasn't thinking anything. I was just kind of like, it was almost like reaffirming.
Yeah, cool. That's good. Yeah. Kristen, what's up?
As I'm reading through that, and like when I looked over the assignments that are posted, so like the context report kind of goes along with knowing and understanding your context, which is like one of the bulleted things. Is that?
Yep.
Okay. And then like the policy analysis kind of, so like each step as we go will kind of be those bulleted areas.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So it's broken down. So let's do that. Let's go to I'm gonna go back to table of contents, and you can open like obviously, you know, you can have open multiple parts. So let's actually go to week 2. And I'll share my screen again. So basically what you'll see at the top is the standard, right? Those list of ELCC standards. So I wrote that, what the learning objectives are for that standard, which is also in the rubric. That's another document that's there. And then the learning tasks that I've assigned to get you to meet the learning objectives. So what will be coming up next week, we'll all be reading from this book, the Supervision and Evaluation. And might have made an error here, actually, that I look at that. I got to make sure I put that in week 1 also, chapters 1 and 2, because we should read that this week. But next week, you'll be reading chapters 3 and 4. Like, you're reading that on your own. You're taking notes about the reading. I'm not micromanaging that. I would just say don't wait till the end, because you'll need the really kind of finite ideas that are presented in this. This is like a workbook, right? This is like a guidepost for how you can engage in supervision of teachers, right? And evaluation of teachers, and support teachers in professional development. I mean, one of the things that I'm really thankful for, and one of the reasons why I like this book, but I'm also really thankful for in my professional career, that I see happen differently now, and it is upsetting, is that we had a teacher center in my school. I don't know that that exists in Pennsylvania, but it was a space where actually a woman, Mrs. McCready's, who was a retired teacher, like 35 years, we had a wonderful space. It was like actually the size of my townhouse, where there was tons of resources there. I mean, we could eat in that space, have lunch. She'd do professional development sessions, like small group. And sometimes you could just go there to just talk about, you know, the things that, questions that you had, but, or we'd have guest speakers, but it was not in a punitive way. It was like in a very generative and supportive way. So that was the model that I was in as a teacher. And that's what led me to become a literacy coach. Like, it supported my professional growth because, you know, as a teacher, like, someone was there that I could lean on. And so I had a model for how to support other teachers rather than sort of walking around with like a checklist and a gotcha all the time, right? It was very much about building relationships, looking at people's faces, like what's happening in your personal, like I can see that folks are stressed out or you're having childcare issues. Like, how are we dealing with Maslow's hierarchy of needs for our staff? And if you're gonna be a school leader, or you're thinking about that, if that's on your pathway, or, you know, whatever your, the steps along the way to that, or you're the chair of your department, those relationships with human beings are going to be actually the first step. And if you don't have those and don't spend the time to invest in those, then there's no way that you can convince people that people will hear your feedback, that you can coach them, that you'll convince them to try a new model or try an alternative. You'll definitely need that. So Bell Hooks is a scholar who writes about engaged pedagogy. I think I put that up there. And so some of the principles embedded in engaged pedagogy are having an interactive relationship between student and teacher, or having an interactive relationship between teacher and administrator. Building community. I mean, these are like simple things, but there are things that go by the wayside sometimes that I observe in schools, unfortunately, as we get, you know, stressed out with standards and benchmarks and all of these things. This idea that every student has a valuable contribution to make to the learning process. Well, every teacher, every administrative assistant, right? Every paraprofessional, every custodial staff member, every school safety officer. Like, we need all of these people to make the school community a safe and supportive space for students. And the classroom or the school as a cooperative space. Those are some principles of engaged pedagogy, and you can read her full chapter in the course introduction. So Kim Marshall's approach aligns with some of these principles that I've discussed. So that's why we're reading the text. Questions so far? I can't see everybody, so I don't know. If you have something, then you could just say it. I gotta open my thing. Okay. We're good so far?
Dr. Pavone, are you going to touch on, I'm sure you are, but the peer reading discussion and writing and feedback?
I'm about to get to that right now.
Wonderful.
So, okay, so I'm actually gonna, that's weird. Okay, here we go. So here's what I did. So there's, I believe, 19 of you. I think that's the number. So I basically, if you go to discussion board, like this is discussion number 1. So there's, if you look back, let me just click back. There's tons of articles here to help you work on your mission and vision, right? Because that's mission and vision and principles of leadership. That's component number 1 of your complete project for this course. So there's all these articles. You're not going to read all of these articles, right? You're just going to be assigned. Here's the group. So you're in a team. I have to double check if I assigned you a team. I don't know what your view looks like. I did it so long ago that I can't remember if I put you in groups or I have to make them. So my bad, because I just didn't look at that today. But it doesn't matter what groups you're in at all. Team 1 is going to read a matter of principles. Team 2 is going to read how leadership principles can relieve trauma. 7 principles of sustainable leadership, 10 principles of quality leadership, ethical leadership, and then visionary leadership. So in this space, number 1, you should read. So that's why I'm saying peer reading. Number 2, you should discuss the reading, right? Your interpretations, your understanding, your questions about the reading with the other folks in your group, in your team, I highly encourage you, and again, I'm not micromanaging this, but I highly encourage you to draft your mission, vision, and principle statement, right? And you might go dip into other people's groups so that you can see what they've written about, right? Or you can also read the other pieces if you're interested in them. And then again, I'm highly suggesting that you get some feedback from your peers. So y'all can work that out within your groups, your adults. If you were my undergrads, I would give you like a specific rubric and count points, but you're not. So, one thing that I know for sure, and this isn't just because I'm a literacy person, is that the feedback that you give to one another, is generative and honest. So I want to give you the opportunity to work on these components amongst yourselves with one another. And then I will also give you feedback as well. So this is like your first step to work on your writing process. Did that answer your question, Courtney?
Yeah, so just to clarify, are there two things essentially happening within this discussion? The first being we respond to the specific article that you assign our team and like bring up discussion points in that, and then also post if we choose to like our drafts of our mission and vision as
Yeah.
well.
I highly, highly encourage you to do that. And that's a super vulnerable thing, right? So bell hooks also talks about like asking like, and I adopt this principle as well in my teaching of young people, and then in my teaching of adults. So if I'm asking folks to do some writing and to sort of be vulnerable and to write publicly, then I'm also doing that work too, right? So you'll see, I want y'all to get started, but you'll see some samples of other mission and vision and principle statements, things that I've crafted with other school leaders. I'll be discussing some of this with you and some PowerPoint decks as well. So there's other teaching work that I'm engaged in. It's just not all posted. I want y'all to try it out first, right? And give it a go. Does that answer your question, Courtney?
Yes, thank you.
And I would advise also like partner up. Again, I think these groups, I either made them 4 or 5. You should find like one person to work with in terms of if you're sharing your writing, and just work with that person for a week rather than trying to give feedback to a whole bunch of people. It's just easier. And then you could spend sort of some in-depth time giving one another like constructive support. Like, hey, this was a good idea. Did you consider this part of the text? Like, that's the kind of feedback that you give. And about the content, not like edits. Like everybody can put Grammarly. I use Grammarly for my writing, right? Everybody can use Grammarly and work on strengthening the proficiency of their writing. So we're going to focus on content and not like editing. So basically we continue in the same design every week. The next week 3 is understanding your school context. I'm suggesting highly that you have your draft done of your school context and your policy analysis that week. But you'll be working on that in your discussion board as well. And so here again, you're assigned groups, and there's only 2 articles here, so I think I just divided it up. Week 4 is where I embedded. So the standard for week 4 is candidates understand and can effectively use human, fiscal, and technological resources within schools. So you'll read the whole class text, and again, you're just sort of going through this text, and one of the strategies that I use is Post-its to mark up my text so I can actually remember what I've read. And then my colleague and good friend and alum, Principal Chambers, who's a principal for 13 years out of New York. He's still in New York. He's a principal of an elementary school, and he's done a great turnaround in that school. He's an awesome leader. So he's gonna guest speak. What you can't see here, this is not, you can't see it yet because we're gonna wait till that day because he's gonna go through it, but his budget, he was kind enough to give us his budget. I scoured like all over Pennsylvania, and apparently schools in PA do not make their budgets publicly available. which I think is really interesting. So New York City is very easy to find, but you can find a district budget. So like this is Allentown's district budget, but school budgets, I couldn't find it. Maybe y'all found something, but I looked for about
Yes, sir.
yeah, go ahead.
I have my budget book from
Right.
Parkland.
But it should be public. It's not public information.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the difference. Like you should be able to Google your school and find their budget. But unless somebody finds something different, I couldn't find anything. So that's good that you have your budget. You need your budget. So you should be asking for some of that. Like you need data from your school. And so I believe your preceding course, there was things that you should have been collecting. And if that is a challenge, then you can talk to me about that. If there's data that you don't have, because I have some options for you. Y'all with me so far? So he's going to help us out thinking about like how to put these parts together. You have sort of great ideas about school improvement, and we're sort of narrowing it down. You should be beginning to narrow it down to like one domain for school improvement. And he's going to talk about what his was at different points. But how much money do you have to do that, right? And what capacity? Do you have a ton of veteran teachers that can support new teachers, or do you have a school full of new teachers? Right? Do you have a school? Are you in a school and are your schools spaces where maybe folks are resistant to using technology, or in a school like that, one of the first schools that I taught in had like $1 million school, a lab that they didn't budget in the tech support. So what do you think happened to that lab, right? And these were when the MacBooks, like they had the pretty colors, like the turquoise and the orange and the pink and all that, the desktops. Yeah, they just rotted because there was no one there to do, they didn't budget for that. So he's going to talk to us about not doing those things. And then finally, we get to week 5. Chapter 10 of your text is, I think it's called Putting It All Together. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. And so you're putting it all together. Yep, that's what it's called, at the end of the semester. So the standard is you're developing you can develop school capacity for distributed leadership. And then your learning objective is an innovative school staff development plan. Well, you need your mission and vision and principles. You need to know your context. You need to have an understanding of the school resources. That all of those components undergird your plan. So in this space, you'll submit your plan. But if you also go to assignments, right, you'll have these other parts broken down. And then your due dates are embedded in there. So I will be giving you feedback. So you'll do your peer feedback. Write with your peers, please, please, please. Because by the time it gets to me, you should have less revisions to make, because you talked about it with a peer. And I'll be completely honest with you. If you saw you can't see over here, but this part of my room is like I'm constantly writing as well. Okay, I'm going to answer this question. Yep. Who is that? R. Davis. I'm sorry. Who is that? That's Rebecca. Okay, I'm gonna answer your question. I was talking about writing. So I constantly work with my peers, from writing curriculum, for writing my syllabi for classes like this. I partnered with Dr. Wolfmeyer for the articles that I publish, like if I didn't have my friends to do this work, yeah. So even thinking about a distributed leadership model, you can't just bust into a school and say, okay, we're going to come and do this. And I've been a teacher at schools where the decision just came from above and teachers had no say, right? So your mission and vision is a document that is not just what you create, but is a shared mission and vision, right? So it would be a document that is shared amongst your staff in real world circumstances. So I say that all to say, like, try as much as you can to work with one another, because that mirrors the work that you would be doing as a school leader. It's not in a silo at all. It can be, but you will not be successful. Okay, I see in the chat, Courtney says, I am. It tells us which group we're in. Okay, so you all are in your group setup. Cool. See, I did this so long ago, I can't even remember. Okay, so taking us, that's awesome. Can I say this, Rebecca? Okay, so Rebecca was just sharing with me in the chat that she doesn't have like a school budget. So I say, like, if you don't have data about your school, because you'll need that, like, what's your school policies? Like, what are some schools have a zero tolerance policy, which is a whole conversation that we can have about discipline. Or some of those come from a district, or some schools have things like uniform policies. I mean, all of these things. If you don't have the data that you need, definitely be in conversation with the school leaders to get what you need. And you see the kind of data that you need already. So start asking them now before they lose their heads.
Yeah, thankfully, I have a really good relationship with my principal. That's why I was asking what I need. That way I know ahead of time.
What school are you at?
I'm in Downingtown School District and
Okay.
at Springton Manor.
Okay. Okay. I'm not looking at focusing. Is anybody in Allentown? Okay.
Yeah, I'm in the Allentown School District.
What school?
Allen High School.
Oh, okay. So that's Shannon.
Yeah, Mayfield. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Tell him that you're in a course with me, and tell him I said hello.
Will do.
And yeah, he's really great to work with, and you should be able to get any data that you need from him. I like him a lot.
Thank you.
He's a good dude. And so yes, tap into your school leadership. And that's also a way, like, just as a mentorship piece that I'll share with you. You know, you may not have shared your plans with the school leaders, but you need those folks, and you never know when positions are opening up. And yeah, it's definitely a way to strengthen your relationship. You know, if you don't have one, now you have a reason, like, to go talk to someone, is to ask them questions or to interview them if you haven't done that in another course. Patrick says, Patrick, I can say this out to everybody.
Yes.
Okay. Everybody know who you is, Patrick. We know who you are. Okay. Patrick says, what if we don't work for school district? Okay. You're on the school board. Yeah. So, but you should be able to access your data, like, use your power, man.
Okay.
And so if you run into some spaces where you're not able to get what you need, I'll just work with you on an individual basis. It might be a principal that I know or someone in the district that I can ask. And if not, we'll find some replacement data. We might be able to use we can always use Principal Chambers data. Like, he can give me some of that. That's not ideal. Like, I really want y'all to give a go at finding it. And I think, like, that's a part of the work, finding it and making sense of it. Yes, some schools sort of make it more accessible than others. Actually, and to be clear, I'm not trying to throw Allentown under the bus at all. I work a lot with the Allentown School District and the Reading School District, but when we look at the district's budget, it took me a really long time to decipher, and I still don't fully understand it, just the way that it's written. So that could be a part of what your role is, you know, very soon or in the long future. So get used to different systems and charts and how to make sense of that, how to develop literacy around that kind of data. Okay, Jess, can I say your question? Where's Jess? I'm looking around. Okay, appreciate it. I divided the course into weeks. I was wondering what specifically equates to a week. Is it Tuesday, Monday? I think I tried to make look at the due dates on stuff.
So the due dates are on like the first big thing, which is like the content analysis, that's due on the 19th, which is a Sunday.
Yeah.
So I just wasn't sure like what you necessarily were like, what's a week? Because I just want to make sure that I have stuff uploaded and I'm able to provide feedback for my team in a timely manner. So that's why I was kind of asking, like, what are you thinking in response to?
Yeah, so I mean, when I think of this as, I mean, we should have started class yesterday. So I think of this as week one, like as a Monday. So like Monday through Sunday.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And, you know, nudge, I mean, y'all are adults again, like nudge your folks, like, hey, post your stuff, get each other's, share each other's information. It seems like most of you know each other already, I'm thinking. Yeah. Some, okay. So whoever's in your team, spend some time to make sure you have each other's contact information. So one of the things that you're doing, that you're fulfilling with that discussion board is in an official way, like demonstrating how you're meeting the objectives for the course. But in unofficial ways, like you're going to work with each other, like teachers on a team or leaders on a team are texting and calling and having other offline conversations, right? And that's about building those relationships. But then we also have to present our professional selves in sort of in these kinds of documents. So we're operating in two domains. Where are the instructions for the assignments? When I click on assignment, it is blank, so I must be missing where the instructions are. Courtney, you are not. I didn't put, you mean for the writing pieces?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
like school context report.
So go back to the assignment, what is it called? The final that we looked at the beginning.
Yeah.
And those are the expectations for each part. That's a great question.
So then, I guess where I'm confused, hold on, sorry, I'm trying to navigate.
So let me show you something right quick. Hold on, okay? Because this is another way to look at it. So here's how that information is going to happen. So it's if you go to course introduction and you look at course information, right? And you look at final assignment, the guidelines for each section, principles and visions, specifically identify, describe, and elaborate upon each instructional supervisory principle. Those are emerging out of the reading. And explain how, as a whole, your instructional supervisory principles align to the school's vision. So that's the guideline for that piece. I have additional material for each piece. That's my teaching and facilitation that just hasn't happened yet because we're not there. So I'll either through video or through a Zoom, we'll be talking about the writing task. But if you need to like see it, this is one place to look. The second place to look is go to the rubric. So we're always sort of thinking about working backwards. So I'm going to share my screen again. So there's a rubric and you can look at each standard and then each section and what you're supposed to do to meet the target for each section. And it basically says the exact same thing in a different way. So you identify 3 to 5 instructional principles, you describe their purpose, you explain them, and you discuss how they're rooted in the research. And you're provided with the research either through this text or through the articles that you've used on discussion board. So you can use your initial discussion, right? When you first sort of talk about your reading, that's like step 1 in drafting your mission, your principle and vision, right? Because you're talking about the literature. And then step 2 would be to begin to write up this section. And you'll have some additional scaffolds from me to support that piece. So I have that stuff over here, but I wasn't gonna upload now one more thing because it's enough already. Does that answer your question for now, Courtney?
Yeah, I think I must need coffee or something, but the school policy analysis and things, I'm having trouble aligning everything with like where I would find what that is, but I
So
don't know.
it's not posted right now. For right now to be thinking about is just broadly what's looking at the the assignment and what those sections are. So you're going to engage in policy analysis when you look at your school's policy. That's the action that you haven't done yet.
Okay.
So you got to find the school policy, and you got to find what school policy you want to analyze. So are you looking at the discipline policy? That's what I care about a lot, right? So I just taught a course on the school to prison pipeline. So disciplinary measures, zero tolerance measures, that's important to me. The policy that you might be looking at is the literacy program in your school, right? What is the school doing to support students who are emerging bilinguals, students who are English language learners? Like, what does the policy look like for that? What does the curriculum policy look like? What is the design for special education classes? Is it a push-in model or is it a pull-out model? Or is there some combination? How many students needing a paraprofessional who have physical limitations and need additional support are in your school? So need a one-to-one para. Is it an inclusion model? Or are all the students with disabilities? And when I say disabilities, I put the dis in parentheses, right? Because every student needs support in their learning. So I don't use disabilities as a term from a deficit framework. Oh, I don't know. Okay, I'm looking, Mark. I don't know why your chat is not turned on. It's disabled. I'm not sure. I gotta figure out how to do that. I'll look at that in a second.
Sorry, I'm only able to chat directly with you, and I wanted to.
That's so weird. I don't know why that's the case. I'm gonna give y'all some time to talk to each other too. That's weird. I don't know why it's doing that. So I think you have to decide on what you're going to be focusing your project on. So you can begin to think about that now. Like, what do you care about? What's your content area? Like, what domain of leadership matters to you? Maybe it's like school design. Like, I go in buildings all the time. I mean, even now I'm thinking about you, Patrick, and thinking about like COVID. Like, what are the respiratory models in the school so that it could be able to accommodate for social distancing? I'm just throwing out a whole bunch of ideas. So I think what you're passionate about is going to undergird the kind of data that you're looking at. So there's some frameworks for writing about these sections, but I also do not want to box you in. That's why you have a rubric, and I want you to have some autonomy around developing what those sections look like. So hold on. Can you clarify what data pieces we will need to get from our schools? So Jesse, did that, wait, I'm looking here. Jesse, did that, what I just said, help you? So I think the data that you need is going to depend on what you're working on. So the first thing, your first step is thinking about your mission and vision work and like what you care about. What's your content area?
I'm math.
And is it secondary or elementary?
8th grade, middle school.
8th grade. So what's happening in math at your school? What's the math curriculum?
Well, we're in the middle of rewriting it. Can I focus on something with that?
Absolutely. There you go. Like that's policy right there. So what's the curriculum is policy. So what's the existing curriculum? Where are they getting the ideas for new curriculum? Are there consultants coming into the school? How much does that cost for professional development? What's the existing budget to pay for it? And I know I'm talking fast, but like those are all the questions that come to mind.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, Mark, I'm gonna go in the chat and figure out why it's not doing that. I don't think I might not be able to fix it right now. It might be in my settings. Yeah, it's a setting thing. Are we allowed to build on work from prior courses? I looked at policy concerning community engagement in my last class. So I think that's fine. I think you should refine what you did before. So like, let's community engagement is like super broad. So like maybe something, well, what do you care about in terms of community engagement?
Are you right?
Yeah.
I'm curious as to how to reach out to those groups of the Whitehall community that, you know, maybe don't feel connected to the group. I know, like, you know, Whitehall is very much broken into small little community styles and Cementon and then Egypt and stuff like that. And within them, they can have some really strong community building. But you definitely see, I think, leadership and stuff like that tending to come from like Egypt and, you know, not Cementon, but Hakandako areas and stuff like that. So how do we pull from like the Maryland Circle area and so forth, and how do we reach out, and are we using the most effective ways? I think we're in a place too where we think like, well, I made a phone call, I sent an email, I did my part. You know, how can we then go and try to engage those who are not engaging with us or don't know how to engage with us? So
yeah, I think that's a good point. So like when I'm thinking about that work, like going back to that resources list, and I had all of those things there in those resources, that actually is in the Danielson framework. That's number, I think it's number 4. It is number 4.
I think, I believe you're right. Yeah.
Under number 4. Yeah, like professionalism. That's one of the domains under there. So I would look at that. But I think it will also call for some additional research, right? So one of the organizations, I'm sorry to cut you off. Go ahead. One of the, you'll find that a lot of this is so weird how this is. Okay, now I can chat to everyone. I don't know. You'll find that a lot of the articles that I've shared come from ASCD. That's I'm going to mess with this acronym, Association for School Development, I believe. I'm a member of it, and I can't even think of the acronym. But they're a great site for all kinds of topics, and you can find like a 2-page article. So here, John, can I share what you shared? Where's John? There you are. Okay. John says, interested in anti-racism policy. Yes. And LGBT equality. Am I on the right track? You are so on the right track. So number one, I would highly encourage you to look at Bettina Love's work. So this is another thing that you guys got me excited. Hey. If you tell me an idea, I can tell you where to go. So that's another resource. So Bettina actually just started a group called Abolitionist Teachers. Abolitionist. Her book is one of the 2 books that has sold out this summer. So the other one is Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility. And then her book is an Ibrahim Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist. And then Bettina Love's book is specifically about teaching, and somebody Google it because I can't remember. We Got to Do More Than Just Survive, I believe is the title. So there's tons of, you don't need to read a book. Like there's tons of, like, she has TED Talks and she has, there's blurbs, like there's quicker things that you can read, or if you want to buy her book, which is awesome. But it's on back order. So actually good luck with that. But so yes, you're on the right track. Actually, one of my students who just got her doctorate, her name is Emily Pisco. Does anybody know Emily? Okay.
Yes. Woohoo!
How do y'all know Emily?
We work with her at Whitehall Middle School.
Okay, she's so
I
awesome,
actually,
right?
I can stamp on the floor and she hears me.
I love Emily so much. So her dissertation was on policies. I can't tell you the title, but policies to support or school environment around LGBTQ plus students in a Pennsylvania school district. So I have her dissertation. If you want it, I can send it to you. It should be public information already, but if it's not, I can send it to you directly. These are all good stuff. Does anybody want to throw out other things you're thinking about?
Professor.
What's up?
One thing I was thinking of, particularly in Parkland, that I do have the information on, is a concern, and it's something I'm currently working on in another class that I'd like to explore even more possibly in this one, but it deals with the funding for special education. Parkland, case in point, is a perfect example. We only got I think it was $5 million or so from the state and federal government, and it's only an ever increasing cost. And to the extent that I was at a board meeting and a constituent came up and said that he felt that we need to defund special ed because it's becoming unstable. And I'm trying to,
what data?
based on the graph that they had through the years.
That who created that?
The district created.
Okay.
So I think
I'm just gonna pause there. Defunding special education is unconstitutional. I mean, y'all already know this. It's against IDEA and ADA. So that's like when somebody says something like that to me, I'm like, full stop. Go read federal law on public education.
No, I've got a disability, so I'm all for special education. I just use that as an example of what the community member said. But I think one thing I'd like to look at is to see, whether or not we could re-examine the policies to see what is effective and what isn't effective, and what is what isn't doing our fiduciary responsibility in terms of the students, because.
So one of the things that I would just say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to I want everybody to take this moment and let's reframe for a second, right? So your work right now, your work in this course is to look at what's the existing policy and to create a plan and like, so what's happening right now, and use your mission and vision to create a plan for at the district level or at the school level for like the gaps, like what are the things that you think need to be improved upon that's grounded in the data and the research, right?
So creating more anti-bully stuff, or
I mean, that could be an outcome. That's a part of like what you'll develop. So what I heard you saying is more so what you would do in the action research class.
right?
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So here is like, it's a different kind of work. And both of the tasks are good, are valid. But that, what you're talking about belongs in
Okay.
500.
Okay. Sorry.
No, it's good. You're thinking in the right direction. Just don't make more work for yourself. Other thoughts, other things, other questions, other ideas. People need sources.
So I guess I have like maybe an idea. Hi.
Okay.
So I work at a school for emotional and behavioral needs. The students get, it might sound bad, but they get like sent there if their normal school can't really meet the needs of the students. So it's through the intermediate unit. So we have students from all different districts. So I guess I would maybe look into like more, if there are like policies of what needs to be provided from each district for like intakes, or like if I feel a kid needs a one-on-one or something, like I feel like it's really difficult to get, but then I don't really know the process. They're like, oh, they'll handle it, or they'll like look over your case. But like, is there a policy about that? Like, is there exact like requirements that need to be met that I could like personally myself fight for things more because I know about it, and then just like leaving it to other people?
So it is like, it's particularly for special education. It's like special education and Title IX, like because those are federal mandates, it's very, it's specified. So whether, and don't tell me the name of your school, like, right? Like you, like, I don't want to know, but like whether that's happening or not. So again, we're looking at sort of what is the data saying, and also thinking like people have good intentions, right? So there could be limitations that are taking place that schools are underfunded, which is like the point that Patrick just raised, right? So I'm thinking about it raises for me, and I'm like super passionate, and I think y'all can all see that. So I love your ideas. I'm not at all critiquing what you're saying in a negative way. I'm like, let me just push this conversation, right? So in terms of like what students are entitled to, the first place I would look that's going to discern it in probably the most clear way is the Pennsylvania Department of Ed website, because that is going to have policy that's coming directly from, particularly for special education. And sometimes I can't find things on the PDE website. I just send an email. There's a way that you can go in for like most entities and send an email. And so I've had, even in the context of COVID, I was trying to figure something about student teaching. And I sent an email through the messaging system. I was like, there's no way that anybody's ever going to contact me back. And the person like who's in charge of that, like contacted me back, sent me all kinds of documents that I wouldn't have necessarily found on the website. And we had a great Zoom meeting about it, right? So you could cite that as research too when you talk to somebody who's explaining policy to you. But it should be public information. It should be in your school's handbook. It should be something that you can, ask.
Right.
It has to be a document, and a document that's aligned with the specific data for your school. And that may not be something that you have access to, but if you have, I'm just throwing out a number, 100 students that have IEPs, then there should be a plan of what resources specifically does each student need relative to their IEP.
Okay.
And so what format you get that information in, because it has to be anonymized and there's protected information and all that, is like something that you have to sort of navigate. And so actually, this question that Jennifer is raising makes me think, like, sometimes you're going to hit a brick wall with the question, the data that you want, or the things that you're looking for. So it may mean you need to back up and think about what you're aiming to develop. Because unfortunately, you don't have as much time as would be awesome to really, like, you know, investigate. So I would give everything a good go. And maybe that's also part of like what you raise as an improvement, is like the transparency around this information that's mandated. So
Professor.
Hold on one second. There's a lot of questions in the chat. So basically, entire court, Andrew, I'm sorry, all these things I'm just assuming are just for everyone. Is that cool? Okay. Andrew is like, the entire course is around an existing policy. Then we review the data and the budget around that policy to create a better policy where a school lacks. Everything up until better policy, because better policy, it's going to be grounded. We're going back to teaching and supervision, and like how that emerges in how that emerges in the professional development of teachers. So your plan is around how that trickles down in the classroom and like what teachers would need to address these gaps. I think there's some contextual things that are necessary, like what does the school need? But like, what would a professional development model look like so that teachers can enact the policy?
So if I was looking at like a discipline policy, dress code policy, which is 90% of my first job as an administrator in the Reading School District would be, how do I link that to a supervision principle?
So that's I love that question. So if the school, for example, the existing school says there's zero tolerance policy, I'm just naming this one, or a policy around school uniform, and if the kids don't have their uniform, then they got to go back home, right? Or you get demerits, and then you get sent to the school suspension site. And we also find out from the data that, and we know this nationally, that students of color, students of color are overrepresented in school discipline models, right? Whether that's suspension or expulsion. And those students academically are also highest at risk. And I use that term like very sparingly because I don't label students as at risk, but they could be like in suspension cycles and not in school, or not in school because they're in suspension cycles, right? So it's damaging their academic outcomes as a result of some of these disciplinary policies. So a source that I would look at for that in terms of research is my good colleague, Rich Milner. And you could just email me and I could send you some stuff as well. So, well, what does that look like in the classroom? Well, I did some action research when I was a teacher, and we're talking like longer than I anticipated, but this is such a generative conversation. So if anybody has the boogie, like, it's totally fine. But if you want to stay and hang out, like I'll be here till 6, so we can keep going. But if you have to leave, it's okay. So one of the things that happened in the school that I taught in, where this exact phenomenon was taking place, is taking place nationally, is that like teachers were enacting, take off your hat, put away your cell phone, like pushing students out of the classroom for stuff that I feel like you could just take care of in-house. Like you can create practices in your classroom that can remove the need to push students out into the hallway where they're then going into suspension and they have a document and a record behind them. So that's, to me, that's around culturally relevant practices, culturally relevant pedagogy, culturally sustaining pedagogy. So how do I teach, and this is just the context of teaching, the landscape of teaching in this country, a predominantly in Reading, for example, predominantly Black and Latinx school district with predominantly white teachers, right? And we call that racial cultural mismatch. How do I support these teachers in understanding and working with students across cultural gaps? So for me, in my positionality as a Black woman teacher, right? Students see me in a different way. Even when I come to Reading High or even when I go to Dearth, I could just say to a student in the hallway, if you don't put away your phone, or you better take off your hat, right? I'm not reporting them and pushing them out to a discipline model. So that's using cultural currency to do that. So how do we teach folks that want to do that, but don't know how to do that, right? Or learning that? How do we support them in developing that toolkit? And it's not to say that folks have malintent or they don't care or they don't want to. It's the question of how. So that's a great professional development project, and it's something that people are working on across the country since I've been in the classroom. So there's many ways that you can go with that. But we talk about classroom management, that's where we locate that in terms of the teacher. And I think about like, what are your classroom routines and protocols around community? So how do I teach my staff how to do that? Does that help?
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So let me go back. Okay. Rebecca, I'm really passionate about teachers forming relationship with students and the impact it's have on. Yes. Trying to figure out how I can harness this. Should I look at my school's discipline policy and house? I mean, definitely. Like, I think the policy and the data around suspension is going to tell you a lot. I mean, I think that's the same question. Some of the things are invisible though. So I got to think about where else we might locate that. School climate, yeah. So you said you have a good relationship with the administrative, the leadership in the school. I would ask them like what data would speak to that. I'm not sure, because yours is more qualitative.
It's also an interesting time period right now too, because I'm on the committee that the district is pushing PBIS in all of our elementary buildings.
Wait, what is that acronym? What is it?
The Positive Behavior Interventions.
Yeah.
So the tiered support parts, like response to different behaviors in the school, and making it almost like a general system that everyone's using across the building. So consistent expectations for all students in all places.
Because all students are the same.
Right. And I put myself intentionally on that committee to kind of be in the know of that and be a voice of reason throughout that process. So that's why I'm really big on, you don't have a lot of issues in your classroom when you have a really good relationship with your students and they know that you respect them.
so my action research, I mean, this is so long ago, but y'all are like making me like really remember this stuff. This action research project was all these students were disappearing from my English class and this teacher that I coached. And I was like, where you started with these great writing projects. So I'm a classroom teacher. And then they're like, I literally did not know where my students were going. And there was a suspension room in the school that was like straight up police station, like files, and the door was blocked off, and they were like back in what I would say is a holding cell, and they were on in school suspension for the day. And I'm like, but you're in my class, and in my friend Robbie's class, my math teacher colleague, and we don't see any of these behaviors. So where is this taking place? Like, is it in the lunchroom? Is it in the hallway? Or is it in gym? Or is it in the lab that none of the computers work? Like, what are the conditions that create these circumstances? So I think that some of your data can be from your, like, is internal to your school. Like, what are the minutes from those meetings? Like, where are those? Where's the policy, and like what's being discussed? Restorative practices, yes. Why is failing flat? Of course it does. Does not have enough supports. Yes, it can. So everybody, yes. So this is great, Courtney. I think that's a great, yes. So Courtney's asking about restorative practices as a discipline model. And I think yes, so I think that could be a great idea. I just want everybody to continue to like, and you'll get there, like continue to orient yourselves towards how, like, what do I need? What is the capacity that I have in the building? What resources exist? How can I use my vision about what the school should look like, or what this site should look like, or this classroom space should look like, and like what I need to teach teachers to get there. So we're operationalizing it at the classroom level. So if restorative practices is falling short, then well, what do teachers need to do restorative practices better? Like, what do they need to learn? What do they need coaching on? And not to say that they don't have those things, but like maybe they need resources in the classroom. If you're going to have restorative practices, then you need chairs that can move around. So if I'm sitting, I mean, and this is just thinking about environment. If I'm sitting in the chair with the desk, right, attached, everything to it, then that makes getting into a circle and having a conversation like that much more challenging. Like that could be a classroom management situation in and of itself. So you're going to be thinking at that granular of a level. Like what might be all the particulars at the classroom level to make this idea go? So what would you need to do? And how can you make it sustainable over time, not just 1 year?
Right. So are we working from an administrator perspective, or am I like literally working from a perspective of being an 8th grade math teacher? Holler to, I think it was Jesse who also was. But you say within the capacity that we're in right now, I don't know that I would have much influence over that.
So the design of the course, thinking about the model for the course is in the role as a school leader, whether that's
okay.
It could be a coach, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be a principal, right? It could be someone who does staff development as their role. You could be a dean of students. But someone who is engaged in supporting teachers. And so like one of the things that you would need to operationalize, like whatever the work is, if it's restorative practices and you need to focus your efforts on that, well, I mean, there's another side to that, right? Like there's a supervision and there's evaluation. Like what are going to be your models and how are you going to use theories around evaluation? Because you're going to provide these resources for folks, right? But then there comes a point where like, actually like this needs to happen, right? And that's the like tricky part of leadership. As a staff developer, you're sort of investing, you don't necessarily have teeth behind the things that you're coaching folks to do. But if you're a principal of a school and you create a model for the school, right? You've created a plan, then you're also accountable to the district leadership. You said that you're going to do these things, or you've been told that you need to do these things because you're failing, right, in some space. So there's an accountability around this work. And that lands in the evaluation domain. So what might be the evaluations that doesn't necessarily need to be punitive, but what's your expectation? Like how long will it take for a restorative practice model to work? Maisha Wynn is brilliant. She's like the restorative practice. She's at UCLA. And she writes about the same dilemma that you're talking about it falling flat and sort of why that takes place. And so I think it's a great area to explore. And in terms of perspective, Courtney, your perspective is from an emic and etic approach, from an insider and outsider approach, right? Emic, me, you're in it because most of you are in classrooms. So you're an insider. So you like know what teachers need and what teachers don't need. And you're developing your vision for how to do this work as a leader. So there's a tension there inherent in that role. So how do you navigate those tensions? That'll be a part of what you write about. And that should come from the heart. Like that may not emerge in data or what's visible, like what Rebecca asked. That's a part of what your vision is. So when you read those articles, or when you read the articles on mission and vision and principles, like, is it an ethical model? Is it a restorative model? I didn't even put that as an option there, but now I'm thinking about that would be good too. Does that help, Courtney? That's a good question.
Very much, yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, John says that he's restored. John, are you out of the same place that Mike D'Angelo's at? Yes. I can't hear you. You're muted.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
No, he's not at Muhlenberg anymore.
Okay.
But that's where I'm at, Muhlenberg.
Okay. But isn't he at like some restorative practice center or something like that?
Talking about Matt DeAngelis?
Mike D'Angelo. He's an adjunct.
Oh.
But
Okay, I'm mixing it up.
okay. So there's a Courtney, there's a restorative practice center here in Pennsylvania. So Mike D'Angelo is an adjunct in our department. So you might want to talk to him also. You can just email him. When you look him up in K, you should be able to find him, and just tell him you're in my course and he'll help you.
Awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's actually just down the street from where I live.
Oh, you're breaking up. Say it again.
I think it's actually on the street that I live on.
He lives on your street.
No, I think the restorative practice place in Pennsylvania is on my street.
Okay. Well, that's even better. Okay. All right. Other questions? So we're just getting started here, but y'all have some robust ideas. Yeah, I think these are all great. I think just continue to start diving into the material and like make sure that you're making the connection between like the stuff that you care about and then like sort of the constraints and the requirements that you need to align with. But this is also, so like make sure that you're looking at that rubric and make sure that you're looking at like the tasks. But I think it's not so difficult to sort of meet those expectations if you're working thoughtfully. And I'm very hesitant to like put y'all in a box and say, okay, well, this section needs to be this many pages and this, just make it Times New Roman 12-point font, please. Like, I'm not, and something shouldn't be, how many pages something needs to be. Like, I'm not counting page numbers. So there's sufficient space to say what you need to say. And if it's something like that, like I'm gonna give you some feedback, but your peers should also call you out. Like, hey, you didn't spend enough time talking about this idea, or like, oh, you went way too long on this idea and you missed this other part that's in the rubric, right? So that's a part of working on things, but you'll also get feedback from me so we can work on the process. And then I just want to underscore again, I'll say this one more time so everyone put it in the chat, you will get more instructions about each section. You just don't need them today. Was there any other questions? All right, so I will be in touch. Hopefully we can try to do this again this Tuesday. A lot of people are missing though. So, but this group Tuesdays works this time. Okay, so I'm gonna try to force my schedule so that we can do this again next Tuesday. I'll let you know like at the end of the week, no later than Saturday. And if you have questions in the meantime, there's a space called virtual office hours. So if it's questions for the good of the whole, like you can't find something or whatever, there might be some mistakes that I just haven't noticed yet. So you can drop those there, but you can also email me. I'm just gonna give this to you now. This is my phone number. You could just text me and call me. I'm home. I'm typically answer my phone. So, you can send a text first and say, hey, do you have time to talk? And pretty much the answer is yes during the week. And a lot of times if an email's like complex, then I'll be like, just call me because we got to talk it out. Okay. It was so good to meet you all. I am so excited about what you're going to produce. So I look forward to just the rest of the semester, and have a good evening. Take care. Bye.